There were lots of tears and arguments and prayers. My wife and I cried and fasted and screamed into the pillow, up to heaven, and even as we tried to sleep. Some moments I felt like I would fight until I died, and other times I would just as soon die than have to be in one more fight. During that time, we really, really struggled. We struggled to imagine how bad news would ever stop coming. We struggled to hope that somehow things would get better. And we struggled to believe that our family wouldn't be torn apart. But worst of all, we struggled to envision that the storm clouds blotting out our sun would ever vanish, and that we would spend the rest of our lives in that dark, depressed state. It was one of the worst times in our lives. Like many of you who have experienced that, clouds sometimes do cover the sun for us. It might be in the form of a phone call, an argument, a pink slip. Any number of things can lead us down that dark road. But we have not been alone in this. In fact, for thousands of years, people have struggled with being in really dark, difficult places. And so like our family 60 years ago, and for like your family, whenever that may have happened, or you may be in the middle of that right now, there also were a group of people living in the deserts. We call them the Israelites. And they had an obstacle that they were facing, and they didn't know what was going to happen next. And so like them, and like you, and like my family, one of the first questions we asked was, why do we have to deal with this? And we come up with all sorts of reasons why these things happen. We blame ourselves, we blame others, perhaps we blame God for why we're in the predicament that we're in. Another question that comes shortly after is, can we overcome this? I've shared with you before, I don't often get sick. I tend to just avoid those things. But when I do get sick, I wallow in it. You can ask my wife. I'm a big baby. I'll get sick, and I have this mentality. If I've been sick for more than 24 hours, I have a difficult time imagining that I'm ever going to get well again. I'm like, is this ever going to end? And so that might be a question that you find yourself asking if you're in a difficult spot. How can I overcome this? Or can I overcome this? And then, of course, that leads to this. The last question is how can we do it? If we can get to a point where we actually believe that we might be able to get out from under it, then we start trying to take steps to do so. How do we get out of this mess that we've gotten into? Where is God, and how is He going to help us? We make a big deal about the Red Sea crossing because the fact is it's a really big deal. But for some reason, we seem to think that the Jordan River in front of the Israelites this time must not be quite as big. I mean, it's a river, not a sea. And so maybe it just wasn't that bad. But the fact is that the Israelites were not only dealing with the river that lay before them, they also had to deal with the enemies on the other side of that river. We've talked about several times that when the Israelites first crossed over, the previous generation crossed over from the Red Sea, they were leaving the enemy. They were leaving slavery. They were headed towards a place that was promised to them. But as they come up on the Jordan now, a generation later, they are now heading back towards enemy territory. And so they must have been thinking, God, why are we doing this? To give you an idea about what the river was like, we have to go back a few hundred years before most, if not all of us, were alive. I'm not going to name names this evening. Okay, that was not funny at all. Today, because many farmers have tapped into the Jordan for irrigation needs, it is relatively small. I don't want to say a brook, but it's much smaller. But if you go back to the mid-19th century, the Jordan River was between 1 and 200 feet wide and over 20 feet deep in certain locations. Even more so, on top of all of that, the current was too swift for anyone to swim across. Because the difficult part was not simply crossing the water, they were also afraid of the cities and the enemies and the warriors on the other side. I want to pick up in Joshua chapter 3, starting in verse 1. It says, "Early in the morning, Joshua and all the Israelites set out and went to the Jordan, where they camped before crossing over. After 3 days, the officers went through the camp, giving orders to the people. When you see the ark of the covenant of the Lord your God and priests who are Levites carrying it, you are to move out from your positions and follow. Then you will know which way to go, since you have never been this way before. But keep a distance of about 1,000 yards between you and the ark. Do not go near it." Joshua told the people, "Be ready, get ready, prepare yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do amazing things through you." Joshua said to the priests, "Take the ark of the covenant and pass on ahead of the people." So they took it up and they went ahead of them. And the Lord said to Joshua, "Today I will begin to exalt you in the eyes of all of Israel, so that they may know that I am with you as I was with Moses. Tell the priests who carry the ark of the covenant, when you reach the edge of Jordan's water, go and stand in the river." Joshua said to the Israelites, "Come here and listen to the words of the Lord your God. This is how you will know that the living God is among you, and that he will certainly drive out before you the Canaanites, Hittites, Hivites, Perizzites, Girgashites, Amorites, and Jebusites. See, the ark of the covenant of the Lord of all the earth will go into the Jordan ahead of you. Now then, choose 12 men from the tribes of Israel, one from each tribe. As soon as the priests who carry the ark of the Lord and of the Lord of all the earth set foot into the Jordan, its waters flowing downstream will be cut off and stand up in a heap." So when the people broke camp to cross the Jordan, the priests carrying the ark of the covenant went ahead of them. Now the Jordan was at flood stage all during harvest. Yet as soon as the priest who carried the ark reached the Jordan and their feet touched the water's edge, the water from upstream stopped flowing. Again, we're talking about 20 feet deep, 100 feet wide. This is not a small little brook. This would have been a huge river crossing. It piled up in a heap a great distance away at a town called Adam in the vicinity of Zarethan, while the waters flowing down to the sea of Arabah, the salt sea, was completely cut off. So the people crossed over opposite of Jericho. The priest who carried the ark of the covenant of the Lord stood on firm, dry ground in the middle of the Jordan, while all Israel passed by until the whole nation had completely crossed over on dry ground. Okay, so it sounds somewhat familiar to the Red Sea crossing, except being Moses, it was Joshua. Instead of the staff, it was the Ark of the Covenant. Instead of Moses standing there before them, God had the Levites go out into the middle. And as long as the Ark of the Covenant was there, then the waters had stopped. So, a couple thoughts about this. Did anybody catch anything unusual about them crossing over to the other side? Specifically about the ground. Has anybody ever been near a river before? Has anybody been around after it rained? Like Lance and I, we spent 13 years not knowing what rain looked like. But here, like it rains, like I feel like I live in Seattle. It seems like it rains all the time here. But even after the rain stops and the waters start to subside, it's still pretty muddy, right? I mean, has anybody ever imagined walking across a completely dry bed just moments after the water had receded? This was not some kind of accident. There wasn't some kind of dam upstream. This was the work of God, and they came through on dry ground. But I have a lot of questions, and so that's what I want to do for the next few minutes, is just see if we can try to address some of those. My first question is this: why would God choose to part the waters in the way that he did? Why do you think? Do you see any connections, any correlations? He could have done it differently than the Red Sea. Why do you think he did it the way he did? Okay, is it an example of his omnipotence? It's an example of his power, right? I don't know how amazing or how often you think about a boat floating on water, but we have cruise ships that weigh thousands and thousands of tons, and they just float on the water. Water is so powerful and so strong, right? And God, with just a command, can cause the water to stop. What else? What else do you find interesting about this? Why would he part the waters in the way that he did? Yeah, what I did then, because again, with the exception of Joshua, all of those around had not witnessed the original crossing. Now, they had heard obviously lots and lots of stories about it, but here we have now, they've only heard the stories, and now God's going to say, what I did then, I can still do today. I want to say that again. God said, what I did then, I can still do today. I think that's an important thing for us to consider as we think about God's power and his works and the miracles. Can he still do now what he did back then? Yeah, it gives them all an opportunity to get across. I mean, this was not a small group of people. Where some suggest that it's close to the millions of people, several million people. And so this would have taken a while. And so for all of them to walk across, I think as I got closer and closer to where the water was, I would just be enamored. I'm sure all the little kids would have wanted to ask questions. How is this happening? Right? I saw somebody have their hand up. Yeah. 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 Yeah, and that's a really good point, Rex, because it's a reminder that sometimes God does his best work in the most difficult times. Just when you think it's insurmountable, just when you feel like there's no hope, that's when God says, hey, watch this. This is when God can do really incredible things. And this is certainly an example of that. Bill? Yeah, I was hoping somebody would point that out. You notice that Moses, he didn't even have to get a toe wet. You know, he was up there, he put the staff up, and I don't know exactly what it looked like, except he looked a lot like Charlton Heston. But the waters parted, and they're able to walk across. But here, God says, you got to go to the water. Now, again, I don't know exactly how steep it would have been. I don't know if it would have been a shallow entry or if they would have had to, kind of scooch down the ledge just a little bit. But just think, the first person who goes to put their toe in, who's the one that says, oh, I want to do that? Who wants to be the ones that go out there first, hoping that whatever stopped the water is going to keep the water stopped until everybody got across? I think if I'm going through that, I'm going to walk a little more quickly as I'm going through that part, just waiting to say, ooh, okay, I'm safe now, right? I think, we don't have a real good answer to this, but God doesn't always work in the same ways. In fact, it seems like Jesus tends to do most of his miracles in different ways every time. But God has the right and the ability to work in any way that he wants. And I hope that's something that we continue to believe in as we hear about this story of God doing such great things. There's another thing that I think that's really interesting, because this is about the same place where God parted the waters so that the Israelites could walk through is almost the same place where Jesus would have been when God parted the clouds and brought his blessing on him after baptism. Now, this is also something to think about. They're going in opposite directions, aren't they? But they're really going to the same place. They're headed the same way. Remember, the Israelites, they're on the east side of the Jordan, and they're going to be crossing over. What are they heading to? They're heading to the promised land, but what else are they heading into? Trouble, hardship, people who want them dead, right? And Jesus is going to be on the west side. He's going to be crossing over the east, and so he's going a different direction, but where is he headed to? He's also headed towards trouble, towards a very difficult road ahead of him as well. And so it's at this same place that we can be reminded that God is with us even on the most difficult journeys. And so I want to ask this: do you have any rivers in your life that just seem uncrossable? And what happens? And I think this is a really important question, and the one I just want to kind of linger on throughout our class time is, what happens when God doesn't part the waters? I think we all want to believe in a God who parts the Red Sea and parts the Jordan and raises people back to life and allows the blind to see and the deaf to hear and the lame to walk, and those who are sick and have ailments are healed. We love those stories. But what happens when God doesn't choose to part the waters, to raise the dead, or to heal the sick? I want to read this. This is an excerpt from Robert Morgan's book, The Jordan River Rules. It says, "The Lord doesn't always do as we expect. If you come to the water's edge and the waters don't part, don't lose your faith, your focus, or your hope." Some years ago, Backpacker magazine ran an article on how to ford a river. The writer warned that river and stream crossings can be the most dangerous part of backpacking, and river drownings cause more hiking deaths than snake bites. The best way to cross the river is with a rope as a safeguard, said the magazine. If you have a group of hikers, the strongest should wade into the river with ropes underneath his armpits connected to hikers upstream and downstream. Once on the other side, he should secure the ropes to a strong tree using a carabiner and a sling, and then the others can cross one by one, secured by the suspended rope. Our Lord Jesus has already crossed the river of every challenge we will ever face, and he has secured the rope of grace to the tree of God's omnipotence. We simply hold on by faith and proceed one step at a time. We trust that God will take care of us. Back in Isaiah 43 verse 2, it says this: "When you pass through the waters, I will be with you, and the rivers will not overwhelm you." I want to read that one more time. "When you pass through the waters, I will be with you, and the rivers will not overwhelm you. I love knowing that God has already gone before us and He has gone through difficult places. But we have to be reminded that God doesn't always choose to part waters. Now, I have to tell you, I love music. I love singing. I love whistling. I love humming. If I'm near people, I whistle because I don't want them to hear me sing. But I'm always doing it. I don't even notice it. But I love music, and I love the messages that they convey. I think I shared this a few months back, and I believe this to be true, that our theology is more formed by the songs that we sing than by the sermons that we hear. I want you to think about that. How many of you have thought about those songs, the ones that you sing over and over again? Those are the ones that really do form us. And I love a lot of songs, but there's one in particular that I really like. In fact, I think Jennifer introduced it to me probably, 5 or 6, 7 years ago. She's now pretty famous. You may have heard of her in the Christian world. Her name is Lauren Daigle, and this is one of her songs that she wrote years ago. It's called I Will Trust in You. And so you should be familiar with it. I suspect that Chad has probably led it here. I feel like we've sung it here before. I am not going to sing it for a lot of reasons. But one of the reasons is I want you to just hear the lyrics. Because if we have sung this song before, these are words that you have said, and they're pretty profound. So let me start into it. It says, letting go of every single dream, I'm going to lay each one down at your feet. Every moment of my wandering never changes what you see. I've tried to win this war, I confess, and my hands are weary, and I need your rest, mighty warrior, king of the fight. No matter what I face, you're by my side. Oh, I love that. I mean, that's really good. But then she's going to start this chorus. And this is where, when I first heard this, I thought, oh man, this is so challenging. She says, when you don't move the mountains that I'm needing you to move, and when you don't part the waters that I wish I could walk through, and when you don't give me answers when I cry out to you, I will trust, I will trust, I will trust in you. Truth is, you know what tomorrow brings, and there's not seen. So in all things, be my life and breath. I want what you want, Lord, and nothing less. When you don't move the mountains, I'm needing you to move. And when you don't part the waters, I wish I could walk through. And when you don't give the answers when I cry out to you, I will trust, I will trust, I will trust in you. You're my strength and my comfort and my steady hand. You're my firm foundation, the rock on which I stand. Your ways are always higher. Your plans are always good. There's not a place I'll go you've not already stood. When you don't move the mountains, I'm needing you to move. And when you don't part the waters, I wish I could walk through. And when you don't give the answers as I cry out to you, I will trust, I will trust, I will trust in you. I love the chorus. I mean, Lauren can sing, but these lyrics can preach. For us to be reminded that when things don't work out the way that we want them to, that does not in any way question the power or the goodness of God. Boy, I wish you could have been a fly on the wall. On Monday night, we had our monthly meeting with the elders, and we've been going through some really interesting, difficult topics. And the one this last month, that it takes a great amount of faith when they don't. That we have to trust in God when He parts the water or when He leaves us on the wrong side of the river. So we know that sometimes God allows us to ford the water, but sometimes he has a different plan altogether, and that doesn't mean that he's forgotten us or we've lost or he doesn't love us. I want to read one more story. This came from also from Robert Morgan's book. I'm just going to summarize it. There was a guy by the name of Laszlo. He was an Ethiopian who wanted to share the gospel to a specific Gayobi village. He had longed to have an opportunity, and so he was preparing for his journey to go and share the gospel. He packed what little he had. He grabbed his Bible, all his stuff, his papers, and he headed that direction. But when he got to the checkpoint, he was detained much longer than he had hoped. And that made him more and more nervous because he wasn't in a vehicle. He was walking. He didn't have a headlamp or a flashlight of any kind. And he knew that every minute that he was delayed, it was going to make his journey even more treacherous. And he prayed, God, please allow me to get through quickly. But he sat and waited and waited. And finally, he got through that checkpoint, but it was much later than he had hoped. And he started on his journey, and it was dark, and there was no light. And at one point, as he was walking over a very narrow path, the ground underneath him caved in. He slid down this embankment and landed in the water. And he was freezing cold and soaking wet. And because the bank was so steep, he couldn't get back up it. And so he had to just keep walking down this river, hoping to find his way, hoping he would get up at the right place so that he wouldn't miss the village that he wanted to go to. Finally, after walking till early morning, he was met by a group of people down by the river. And all of a sudden, they started yelling and screaming, and he thought, I must be in the wrong place. And one of them came up to him and said, he is the fair one, and he has come to us out of the water. A murmur of excitement rose, and an older man asked, but does he have them? Has he brought the golden leaves? Well, Laszlo didn't know what to say, but he sat there and waited till another man came to talk to him, and through their broken translation, the man asked him again. He said, please tell me if you have the gold leaves. Laszlo had no money. He had no gold. He didn't know what to do. And as he was looking at these people who were looking back at him, he began to pray, God, give me guidance. And then he reached into his bag and he pulled out his Bible. It was a black-covered Bible, but the edges of each page was gold. And the people gasped, it's true, the gold leaves have come. The medicine man explained, a long time ago before my father died, he told us that one day a fair man would come to us out of the water with some gold leaves. The gold leaves were the truth to show us the way. We have waited for the truth for so long, but now you have come through the water. Laszlo began preaching the gospel, and dozens of people accepted Christ on his trip. The work still continues today, and the good news is spread throughout that corner of the world. And the reason why it happened is because God allowed a man on a path to fall down and land in the water. God knew the plan that he had for this man. Had he had walked on the road, he probably would have gotten no attention whatsoever. But God led him through a difficult place and on a long journey to lead him to where he wanted him to be. Sometimes God doesn't part the river. Sometimes he just allows us to fall in it. And how many of us are better because we have seen those raging waters and God has allowed us to get onto the other side. And so now we get to the end of this class, and so you finally get Jordan River rule number 7. Trust God to turn problems into pathways. Trust God to turn problems into pathways. When we were talking about miracles on Monday night, one of the things that everyone acknowledges is that, God could be doing miracles and we don't even know it. And I just wonder how many of us have been involved in some kind of miracle in some way that God has been working in your life and working in the lives of people around you, and that He's leading you not only closer to Him, but leading you to an opportunity to bring somebody else closer to Jesus. Who knows what miracle might take place if you have to stop at the gas station tonight? Who knows what miracle might happen when the phone rings and on the other end of the line is a telemarketer? Well, that doesn't seem like a miracle, but boy, God could sure make one out of it. What happens if we continue to pray, God, allow your will to be done in my life. Open up my eyes and allow me to see what you have for me. What kind of miracle can happen if you pick up the phone call to talk to that relative that you hadn't talked to in years and swore you never would again? What kind of miracle could take place if you could start forgiving someone for what they did to you last week, last year, or 50 years ago? My prayer is that when we encounter difficulties, just be willing to believe that God is big enough and loving enough that He will be with us no matter how deep the water and how difficult the storm. My prayer is that we will be ready to cross rivers that God leads us to. And if He doesn't part them, may we just trust in Him each day. Let's close out in prayer. God, I thank you so much for reminding us through this story that sometimes you allow us to cross on dry ground, and sometimes you send us another direction. Sometimes you have us just sit there waiting on the edge of the water. But God, I just pray wherever it is that we are, that we will continue to seek you. I pray that you will reveal yourself to us and encourage us to continue to seek you and your word and your goodness and your mercy. And God, I pray we not just seek that, but then we offer it to other people. God, I know that there's probably some people in this room that are they're hurting, they're lonely, they're angry, they're struggling, they're apathetic, they're just going through a difficult season. And so, God, I pray that as a family, that we be willing to grab rope and help people get across to the other side. But even as we do it, we know that you've already gone ahead of us. And so, God, I just pray we never stop glorifying you for what you've done. We thank you for all that you've done for us and all you've promised to do and all that you're going to do until we get to heaven. Lord, just allow us to bring it down here. May you be glorified and always. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Okay, so just